Hi everyone, my name is Scott Shores, and I'm doing a series regarding the last 4 years of my life, 4 or 5 years of my life, from 2018 until present, and there are several entries, and this is just another entry. And for this entry, it's going to span from about July 26th to, I think, about January 31st. Try to make that part kind of quick, and set the whole premise for the rest of this here. What I would actually like to do is I'm just going to start out by reading a quote. Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobes. Let them call you nativists. Wear it as a badge of honor. Let that sink in. I'm going to read it again. Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobes. Let them call you nativists. Wear it as a badge of honor. Good buddy of Stephen Harper. Let's go back a little bit further. I want to read something else. The United States began to go in the wrong direction after the passage of the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. The African Americans were doing fine in the late 50s and early 60s before the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act infantilized African Americans by making them dependent on government and removing any incentive to work. The only racist people remaining in the U.S. are black. And white people have no racial animus towards African Americans anymore. And if there is any, it's not something the government should be concerned with. These are two, now that's from a court filing. I'll put up my references and you know who these are from. These were part owners and vice chairs of Cambridge Analytica, which would have been, you know, parent company in association with SCL Group, and so EMIC. And you know, the EMIC contracts are the one that came after me. Again, we'll put this back up on the screen there. And yeah, what you'll do is, if you actually check in 2018, you'll then see that individual come into Canada, and then you'll see, you know, verbiage starts to change a little bit in Canada, and then by January 28th of 2019, Stephen Harper is parroting the words directly. Right? And so that's just kind of a little bit of a setup going into the rest of this. But what we also need to talk about around the same time is the what was going on with, say, like Doug Ford in trying to install his own personal police at the time. In this case, it was Rob Taverner, which was I'll just read I'll read the title of the article. Doug Ford's friend was named Ontario's new OPP chief. Why that's now causing political uproar. Right? And then we can jump forward a little bit, and by March 6th of 2019, he stepped back and out of it. And that was just before the whole issue with the Mark Norman thing going on. Well, remember, Dan Kinsella came from Ontario, and around the same time Dan Kinsella was selected, Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, who are very partial to Postmedia, were having meetings, right? And they've already got this on record that, you know, and partly they were trying to install police or whatever. Now, it doesn't mean anything on its own. It doesn't mean anything malicious. It just means there's an interesting amount of evidence that seems to point to that. And if we kind of jump forward a little bit more and look at the RCMP's outcome with the second, I think his name was Matthew, and I'll put the name up here. It was just a case in, I believe, June 2022, where it was dropped by the RCMP against this individual, which related to the initial Mark Norman charges. And if you start looking at the documentation, you'll see that RCMP was supposed to forward their case back to OPP, but never did. So, to me, it seems like something's going on here, and it all converges on whatever was occurring in May. And you know, to that, I'm going to read another quote then about the Mark Norman issue. This is from a former Conservative, you know, minister and defense minister, well-respected man, and I have absolutely no problems with this fella. I think he's very well-spoken, and he's very professional, done a lot more than I ever did. So, buddy, listen, I'm giving you props here. Peter MacKay says, there are things the RCMP will have to answer for. And, you know, I want to take this a little bit further because we need to really understand what was happening around May and why the RCMP probably targeted me and why they had HRP very reasonably target me. This change in sense of security and why some employees thought they knew what was going on, other employees didn't, and it starts to become more apparent here. Because I want to read this about this. Did the Mounties drop the ball? Former Conservative ministers Jason Kenney, Aaron O'Toole, very partial to Postmedia. Not so much Aaron O'Toole because they kind of ran a coup against him in early 2022. Early 2022. Right? Good job, Candace Burgett. Anyway, Aaron O'Toole and Peter MacKay acknowledged this week that they spoke with Heinen? Would have been Mark Norman's lawyer. And it's believed the information they provided helped to get the case dropped. Right? Wait, do you hear the relationships between them and Postmedia? And I just want to read one more quote before we jump into the real guts of this here. And this is from McKay, from my understanding from this article. I'll put the quote up so there will be clarification, because I don't want to misquote somebody or attribute them to something. It's very difficult doing this, so you can check the overlay for the reference. And again, if I will apologize if I get something wrong, but this is a lot of data to try to relay, so please know that I'm not coming from a place of malice if I'm doing anything like that. I will retract and apologize if I make an incorrect statement. This is not about demonizing anybody. It's about understanding what happened. Okay? It seems in retrospect that there were a number of people that I would have expected the RCMP to have interviewed in more detail about the case, given that a single count of indictment of breach of trust covers a period of time in which the Conservative government, ministers like myself, Minister Kenney, and others, could have and would have had relevant information that was not requested. And so that is a question of operations and investigative techniques that the RCMP will have to answer for. So they were facing a lot of questions about what they were doing and some embarrassment now that they had to drop this case against Mark Norman. Right? And now you've got all these coincidences with my job being posted, you know, and then Postmedia seeming to start this attack and these dates now correlating with me, and then May 27th, my wallet gets stolen. Right? And while you also have this pardon of Conrad Black by Donald Trump, and then boom, you have the China right here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Something's very clearly going on there, right? And I just want to show you the integration of Postmedia with these individuals, Jason Kenney, Doug Ford, and their very public relationship, and why I have questions about the origins of Dan Kinsella. Nick Coulsbergen, Virgin, Canadian news media company. Postmedia has hired Alberta Premier Jason Kenney's former chief of staff, right? And Postmedia was trying to be part of Jason Kenney's war room. And you can see these kinds of connections coming out here. And then you got another quote from Doug Ford speaking directly about his feelings towards Postmedia. And Doug Ford, any relation to Toronto Star? Reporter, well, no, it's Postmedia. Doug Ford, oh, good, I like Postmedia, that's good. Yeah, I bet you do, Dougie. I bet you do, buddy. I'm not fully judging, but come on. All right. So, what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to bring up the EMIC contract. EMIC contract number 1. And remember, during the investigation at JDIrving, my location was set to this residence in Stillwater, Nova Scotia. And I did find all that information associated with them with JDIrving and then these EMIC contracts. Again, relating back to those quotes that I just put out in the beginning. But now you can look at these individuals interacting with Postmedia and say, well, what is the quality of these people? And if you go back and you look at what they're supporting, Postmedia has been supporting conspiracy theories. They're like supporting some racists in some cases. Like they're giving a platform for hate in these individuals. And it's like there's a difference in a platform and difference of opinion and people who are obviously just trying to spread hate. When you get somebody who's trying to put people into groups, the gays, the blacks, the whites, the women's, the right kinds of white, that right there should be your the first red flag that goes up, right? That's somebody trying to divide and conquer, right? That's, and the fact that men don't see that, it doesn't matter, right? You know, we're looking at my last day, right? I went to speak to HR about this. I did a whole write-up on this for December 31st, so I'm not going to go into many details. The write-up does the rest of it. It explains what happened over those couple weeks, why I acted the way I did. They did lie to me about it, obviously. And you know, that part is what it is. And I'd recommend you go read the document from December 23rd, 2021. It actually shows my complete line of thinking in this, and it actually disproves everything HRP said August 2nd, 2022, when they performed their false arrest. I mean, it's pretty clear that what they said is completely inconsistent, and it's just based on their own ignorance, which we're going to get to, right? So I want to read, what we're going to move forward now. I'm going to read another quote. If an election is worth winning, then there is someone willing to steal it. This was by Mark Roman, treasurer for the International Democratic Union, headed by Stephen Harper. So now you've kind of got all these people clumped in this little box trying to bring this idea of populism, which is also accompanied by racism, white nationalists, homophobia, misogyny, right? These same individuals trying to bring that into Canada. And they start using specific words, deplorables, right? Like it's from that textbook, from those very individuals. They couldn't even hide it. So we jump forward a little bit further, and you get into, you know, about August 29th of 2019, Doug Ford names former Postmedia VP as Chief of Staff. Right? So you've got these people, obviously, these very specific companies, these individuals, all working together to do something very suspicious here. And it raises some very big concerns about what happened during the Freedom Convoy. Why the police didn't react. I have serious questions about it. Why didn't our CMP react? Why didn't Ontario Police react initially? It's got, I can't prove anything like that, but, you know, I would really want to know the dispositions of these people in relation to that event, especially given down in the States that it was believed that they were supposed, that the police were being asked to pause just to let something really bad happen, and then that bad actors within that group would fulfill the rest of it. Because that's all that it takes. Democracy can be gone in just a hesitation. They almost seen that in the States. Their VP was almost hung. And make no mistake, had those people got a hold of him before the good people in the crowd could have, good people, you know, the ones who would never have really done anything, would have been able to stop them, it would have been too late. So there were probably people in the crowd that would never ever do anything. But would they actually stop what was going to happen before it was too late? No, they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have. How could they? But yes, they would have contributed to it. And that part right there, that they can't make that kind of connection, that they were an active party to, you know, trying to hang the Vice President of the United States. There's a disconnect when you're not understanding what those people were really intending to do. But, you know, those are my opinions, and I'm not trying to butt my head into U.S. politics. What I'm stating is these people came to Canada. They are related to those people, so I have no choice but to actually speak about them, because it does look like they tried to drag that shit into Canada. Clearly they did. Right? So, you know, now I should probably speak about my feelings and how I felt around that time. I knew these people ruined my life, okay? I knew they did something really, 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 really bad. I didn't know what to do. And I can't tell somebody how awful that is to know that these kinds of monsters ruined your life. For what? I got a disabled woman I'm caring for. I would have just walked away. So why do something like that? Why treat somebody like that? You're just a monster. Right? I'm dealing with real monsters here. But also, to be clear, had I tried to get a lawyer, if you check the Emmett contracts, and then the events with the police and stuff, it's quite reasonable to state that at every point I was being watched. So I never at any point ever had client attorney privilege. I would have exposed every single person that I came in contact with. And for what? I was the one coming forward. I said there was a problem. I was being forthcoming. So why would the police be targeting somebody like that? It doesn't make sense. If I was doing something bad, why would I come forward and say, look, something really bad's going on? Anybody, even the dumbest police officer, would know that. The dumbest of dumb would know that. It makes no sense. So why would they be targeting me unless they're trying to frame me? Which again is consistent with my feelings about how everybody was acting. Right? So after a couple months, I thought about everything, and this, I was like, they ruined my life. They said they were going to contact me. They didn't. They told me I had 2 references on my file because I was really smart. And I should have had references. Right? From my manager, but also a director. When I contacted them, we don't give out references. Right? I bet you they got deleted as soon as I left. And that's what I'm talking about. These people knew what they were doing. They were lying, cheating, and stealing and manipulating that record. That offer on July 26th for anything I wanted, that wasn't. That was a phishing campaign. Right? That was a hook. They hoped I'd bite that and then they'd reel me in and cut me up. That's what they were going to try to do. And, so that got inside my head. And it's just like, I'm a proud, capable, smart person. Why would you do this to me? Why would you do this to me? Right? So when it approaches November, my letter and stuff was ready. I thought something else was going on here. I talked to my mother about this, and she's like, no, Scott, they obviously targeted you. She's like, I agree with it. We're okay. We don't do anything wrong. We're not doing anything bad. We try to be good people. I support you in trying to do and saying something about this because you really think something happened. And she knew I was smart, so she supported me in that. And so, I had my whole letter and stuff ready to go. Probably by about the 17th or 16th, 17th of November. And I want to state that I never used any employees' names, ever. And I never used anybody else's experience or anybody else's stories. I generalized every interaction as to try to remove, so they couldn't target anybody else because I knew these monsters were doing something. I knew they were doing something really bad. So I figured something was going to happen. So within 2 days or 3 days, boom, I receive an email from the government about a job with Capital Health. And you're just like, I didn't know. Now, I was just like, okay, well, maybe they want to talk about it. I feel like I was being watched. And maybe they want to talk about it. We get this out. We can deal with it. And then I emailed back, and then nobody emailed me. So I said, well, I'm still going to go file my complaint. Because my complaint shouldn't be dependent on this made-up job at Capital Health. Why not just talk to me? Right? But you'll see later on, I then came back and I looked at this during the investigation. Hawko, get down. Get down. Destroying all my papers. I love you, buddy. It's okay. Come here. Come see me. It's okay. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. Oh, you're a good boy. Oh, I love you. Okay. What you'll notice is on the same day I get this email, you'll see that Halifax police apology to black community for street check set for November 29th. But you'll also see that Jim Perrin got transferred in right around November 19th, 2019. Again, this individual would have had control over the case with my wallet, and their job posting went up within 12 days after my getting my wallet back. So now you've got this apology, another HRP event, you've got this Jim Perrin event, you've got me, and now you've got an event on the same date for Postmedia, and this is right from their own documentation. It says, we received our designation as a qualified Canadian journalism organization. Now remember everything that was going on in March. They just moved here. We're launching this attack against these individuals. And then there's another event. TorStar shutting down Halifax and other free dailies. Now what's important here is TorStar and Postmedia were under investigation for collusion at that time for that kind of behavior. One opening and closing so that it would work out, I guess, financially for them. I want to be clear, I'm not making an accusation. That's up to the Competition Bureau to investigate. I'm only generalizing something I was read off the internet, and there's articles from the Bar Association on this topic that I would recommend you educate yourself and not rely on my secondhand information. I'd like to make a correction to some of the information. It's regarding Postmedia receiving their journalistic accreditation on November 19th, 2019. That was a typo. You'll notice there are a lot of different typos in there. I tried my best to be consistent, but what I was doing was just adding events in and then sorting them. So there were lots of opportunities about that. I was very clear that it was an alpha version of the information, and since there were several hundred entries, it was very difficult to go back and check every single one. That being said, I didn't even learn about that until like the War from the Neural Network was basically released, which would have been June, July of 2022. So that was never anything that my actions were really that dependent on that. But it is appropriate to clarify that point because I want this to be based off of evidence, and I will admit my mistakes. That being said, it does not change that they were in Halifax at the time, that they did seem to target JDIrving, and that TorStar did shut down their office. It doesn't change that. It doesn't change that they were under investigation for collusion, and it doesn't change the events that then happened with JDIrving selling their media business to Postmedia. It doesn't change any of that. Yes, it weakens the argument one bit in that part of it, but it still relates all these people through each one of these points. And again, I only assigned that a 1%, 1 in 100 chance. And I did it for that very reason, so that because I knew there were things that were going to be wrong, or maybe not entirely fully that chain of events, right? And the best way to deal with that is to not assign anything any special meaning, but just give it a small value and inflate it. And with that, I couldn't really inflate that value. It was kind of what it was. And again, it doesn't change the dates with Jim Perrin. It doesn't change the dates with the apology. It doesn't change the dates with TorStar. It doesn't change that fact that JDIrving was engaged with Postmedia and they had all these issues and that would have been persistent through. It doesn't change any of that, right? So, but I would like to make the correction because that's the fair thing to do. Thank you. Guys, for racism, calling it disingenuous until these right kinds of white got what they wanted. Some of these people supporting white supremacists, homophobes, misogyny, conspiracy theories, the worst kind of hate. Let me go back and read a quote. Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobes. Let them call you nativists. Wear it as a badge of honor. That should have been what Dan Kinsella said. But it's easy to lie to a group of people when you have a lot of money backing you, isn't it? And I fully support Dan Kinsella coming out and making his own statement in regards to that. He's the one who said that he would. So, we'll jump forward a little bit. And, you know, eventually they did set up the meeting, but they delayed it. I was like, you people are messing around with me. If you want to sit down and talk, say we're going to sit down and talk. I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. We'll be done with this. I'm not asking for anything, but I'm trying to tell you something really bad happened. Telling you. And I'm going to come in there and sit down and tell you. So why would you send the police after me? So on the 9th of December, I submitted my complaint to JDIrving. And I put a lot of thought into it. I was like, is this the right thing to do? But I knew they came after me. I knew they did. And if they'd already ruined my life, then what's the difference? Right? They ruined my life. I knew that they did that. I knew that whatever this government thing was a lie. Because then they could say, oh, you just didn't want to do this because you didn't get a job. And then they could use that as a reason to investigate me and my family. And that's all they were really doing. These people were not sincere. These are not good people. These people know that these police framed me. They watched them do it. They are covering that up. And they're going to do whatever they have to do to cover up for what these people did. Right? So when you're faced with something like that, when you're faced with that kind of hate, when you're faced with that kind of denial, when you're faced with that kind of useless kind of human being that is just going to frame you because they can't face how useless they are, a standard approach is not going to work. When you're getting bullied in school, is just laying there and letting them do it the way to deal with it? No, everybody's going to tell you you need to confront them. You need to deal with that head on. They're not going to respect you, and they're not going to give you the fucking chance. So you need to deal with it. Right? So I'll put up the part of the quote that I sent in that email, and I want to read the end of it. And just to, highlight where we're at in this part of it. So if you want to drag everybody into this, then we'll do it, because in the end it's the right thing to do. And I'd really rather not. It's your choice, and to me, it shows nothing but your clear disregard and contempt for the people affected when you can just accept responsibility for your failure. So know this. This is absolutely not going to disappear. The magic money wand you are so privileged to waving around isn't going to work. And now you will all have to blatantly look in someone's face and lie, misrepresent and bully and harass me and others further. Straight to Canada's face for that matter. And then what? Throw Audra or some other people to the sharks to protect yourself again? Blame everyone else but you? Go ahead, but this time you won't be able to hide it. This time you will all be accountable. And there will be absolutely no negotiating or compromise or concessions. I have not lied to you once, and I will not lie to you now. If you wish to test my resolve, then we shall test it together. And we are still testing my resolve in this matter. I didn't lie to them then, I didn't lie throughout this process, and I certainly am not lying to them now. What these people did was beyond disgusting, and then the level of retaliation that then followed. When they knew I did nothing wrong. I then went in, did my interview at the Capitol Health Building, which also turns out to be the CSIS nest. So you got somebody obviously walking right in there, willing to say, look, something happened, I'll walk away, but you gotta record it. So why would that person be involved in something? It makes no sense, and even the dumbest of dumb police would know that. Even the dumbest, which means it can only be corruption, right? So I do my interview, and it went really well. Marsha's like, it went really well. And it's like, I know. But I never once mentioned anything about JDIrving. Never did, because it was, if they wanted to ask me, then I would have brought it up. But they chose not to. And they were saying how, because it went really well. And so, I went to visit some friends or whatever. And I was on my way out of the city, and it wasn't even 8 hours later. And I had to pull over to put some windshield washer fluid in my cars. I believe it was raining that day. You can check yourself. And I had to pull in at the McDonald's in Main Street, Halifax, or Dartmouth. And I just pulled in, and I had the hood up in my car, my head stuck in, and I hear, hey! And it was this individual from Halifax Regional Police, and there were two what I assumed were guys in the car. And I stuck my head out around, and I said, hey! He's like, oh, did you see a woman walking around in a night dress? And I was like, no, I didn't. I'm like, is there a problem? He's like, no, you just didn't see anybody walking around in a night dress, did you? And I was like, no, if I do, though, who should I call? Should I call the police? He's like, no. It's like, okay. And he didn't really say much, and there were other people around, could have asked, and I was like, okay. And they took off. Now, what's important here is, and it's important to reiterate how I approached this, because like even the event where I typed up that letter and then happened to get the email, right, about the job, I'm not an unreasonable person. I actually try to approach things very rationally so I can educate myself. So when there's an event like that, I even hesitated to assign it a 1%, or even just a 1 out of 100 chance of being related, right? But I think it is reasonable to state that, hey, that's a 1, right? That's just a 1 out of 100. So now we'll take this second event. I've never had a run-in with Halifax Regional Police, and now they're showing up in 8 hours of me having that meeting, within 24 hours of sending that letter to JDIrving, and they're talking about a woman in a night dress when my mother is well known for wearing her night dresses. And when she got sick back in like 2014, HRP had to help look for her in the city. So, I mean, I assigned just a 1% to that, but also note that if they knew about those night dresses, it's very clear they were watching me well before that. And I do take that, I do see that very reasonably as a veiled threat towards my mother, my disabled mother, which will tie into them trying to say that I'm crazy and using her mental illness against me, right? Because of course they were going to. So, we're going to jump forward a little bit to about the 12th. I said I was going to be in the city. But, with everything going, and I was like, you want to sit down and finalize this? We'll sit down, we'll talk about it. I'll make sure it's being investigated, I'll walk away. Me and a friend went to a diner, local diner where my sister was working, and, we laughed and carried on. I said, you know what, I'd rather be around people. If these guys want to talk to me, they'll send me an email or somebody will call me. And, we finished up our food, and we went back and we gave the leftovers to the dogs. Of course, they loved it. It was like fish and chips. Yum. And we said, you know, we're going to take the dogs for a walk. And at this point, I had left I was like, I'm going to leave my phone behind so I'm not distracted by it. I kind of just want to be free for a minute, you know what I mean? And I didn't really tell this person what was going on with me. I just kind of said, hey, there is something, I might have to go to the city or whatever, because I didn't want to involve a lot of people. And I didn't. So we took the dogs for a walk, and we walked out this old road. It took us quite a time to get there, and we weren't even there for a couple minutes, and a plane comes flying in very, very low. Now, I know what you're thinking, and again, I didn't even associate this in the beginning. I didn't even assign this a 1 in 100 chance. And it was flying really low, and my friend's like, oh my God, they're flying so low. It's like, he's like, you could see the people. And then they turned right over us, and it seemed like they had a big camera, and he's saying, this is so weird. Like, you can see them, like, wow. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Just part of me's just like, you know, that 1%'s like, you just don't, Scott, just don't. And, because you'll let that stuff drive you crazy if you're dealing with these kinds of people. So again, I only signed at 1%. And you'll see why that's important later, especially when you see what Dr. Holmes tried to do. She was extremely unreasonable human being, and she would have used an event like that to completely destroy me, because she's just a hateful fucking human being. So, right? I was completely subjected to that woman's ignorance. That's all that was, right? I found out how ignorant and hateful and corrupt that person could really, really be. So, at that same time, and I didn't learn this till much later on, my cousin who lived in Porters Lake, Nova Scotia, who I wasn't even going to visit, I don't live there or nothing, them and their neighbors were noticing an SUV parked down the bottom of their driveway, and they thought it was watching their children. And their neighbor, being a big man, he got a big old truck and stuff, right? Like, he's going to go say something. He cornered him. And Buddy got out shaking. Said, I'm a private investigator, please don't hurt me. And Buddy, I guess, reported it to RCMP twice as a pedophile, and RCMP never contacted them back. So why would these people be watching my cousin and her children if they know exactly where I'm at, who I am, and I'm willing to talk about this? Because these people were framing me. These people are monsters, right? This is corruption. These are corrupt police. These aren't decent people. These aren't good people. These people don't have integrity. They don't actually have a spine. These people are sellouts and cowards, and this is their very job, is to frame somebody so they don't have to face what they actually did, right? So we'll jump forward, and I'm obviously, like, something's might be going on here, and I sent a list of, you know, questions to JDIrving about the ethicalness of, or the ethics of what was going on. You know, by December 27th, I decided now's the time to try to install security on my system and see what happens. During the download of, I believe, Bitdefender, the whole internet cut out to my house for like 20 minutes. 1%. Now, also during that time, I did find a rope in a tree. It was just like it wasn't shaped like a noose, but it had like a ring hanging from a branch. Now, I don't know how it got there. If it was there before I checked my security cameras, I couldn't see anything. And I did take it out and hold it up to the security camera in case anybody was watching. Being like, where'd this come from? And you'll see why that's concerning, because I found that within 15 feet of where I eventually would have got a signal from a radio transmitter when setting up my cell booster at home. And so, you know, this stuff was going on. I felt something bad was happening, and nobody was contacting me. The director on the 13th did, you know, say that, you know, I contacted legal and we'll be back to you, blah, blah, blah. And then by the 12th of January, by January 5th, something else really interesting happens. It wasn't related to me, but it was related to Cambridge Analytica. And there was a leak on Twitter on, I believe, January 5th? Yeah. And they published materials on elections in Malaysia, Kenya, and Brazil. And next days, so more countries. So it wasn't even just them. They came from Brittany Kaiser, an ex-Cambridge Analytica employee turned whistleblower, and were retrieved from her email accounts and hard drives. So I mean, this is happening at the same time. You got this Emmett company, seemingly, which is really now here and targeting somebody, me. You got this leak coming out. I'm not part of any of this. I'm just upset what they did to me and the fact, right? So by the 12th of January, I emailed the director. I'm like, what are you doing? It's been 30 days and nobody's contacted me. Like, clearly I'm being framed or something's going on here. Like, why isn't somebody contacted? It's 30 days. And they replied stating, oh, no, you're definitely not being. This is a director. The fact that they couldn't figure that out, it's embarrassing, right? They obviously knew something bad was happening and they were complicit and complacent. And they said, I didn't really get a reply, I don't think, until the 14th, so 2 days later. And it was then our investigator, Jim Perrin, will be in contact with you. Now, this is the first time I heard of Jim Perrin. I didn't know who he was, right? So naturally, I'm like, who the hell is Jim Perrin? And then I go back and I start looking. And by the 20th, I submitted the security review of Jim Perrin. Now, you're going to note the length, and it looks long, but here's several considerations. I had to defend myself, and I had to speak to legal, the director, Jim Perrin, whoever the third-party HR was, security, DND, JDIrving directly, and others. So there are 7 people, and I'm only aiming for a 70%, so if you take that document, take 30% off, divide it by 7, and consider that I need to make my case, because if not, these people are going to dominate me, that letter all of a sudden doesn't seem very long. Especially considering I had to defend myself and how accurate it was. It was extremely appropriate, and it was dead on. It highlighted the conflict of interest regarding Jim Perrin and the suspicious nature of him being the one that they had sent. But by that point, I didn't piece together my wallet or anything like that, but I had some kind of suspicion that something was going on. But most importantly here, we talked about racism. Well, I talked about racism and what this individual was associated with. And talked about how appropriate it is to use this person given the diversity of your employees and how easily that could get the shipyard sued or how that could be manipulated against the shipyard and was a major oversight and they shouldn't have done it. And, you know, I highlighted this. I was very respectful to Jim. I even said, like, look, I'm not trying to slander you. I don't have any other way to defend myself. And the only way I've been able to defend myself my entire life is through my intelligence. And so, you know, I typed it up. I did a really good review. Very clearly, anybody reading that would say, yes, there is an issue with this person. Something is going on here. Right? So I receive a reply from, I did then get this reply from Jim. They changed the dates of the meetings and then say, you know, we're going to have a meeting at the shipyard on January 27th, I believe at about 1 p.m. Of 2020. And then I then proceed to prepare myself for that. So what I did was I actually typed up the way that they should have done things. And I mean, I was really educational about this. I wasn't just judgmental. I said, you made mistakes here. You shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have done that. I provided technical information for both the third-party HR and for Jim. I also highlighted the CSIS laws and about national security and about dissent. And stating that, you know, it's there's at least a 6 or 7% chance that, you know, we're monitored because of the severity of this issue. Think about that. A 6 or 7% chance isn't paranoia. I walked into the CSIS nest. This is our national shipbuilder. These are serious, serious issues, and I'm contacting the defense minister. A 6% chance isn't, that's extremely reasonable. And stated, you know, that at any given time I would speak to a psychologist, but also a publicly issued psychologist for all the results to be made public for them to decide for themselves. I stated I'm okay with being under surveillance if that's what's required for this. I didn't realize how bad it was. Right? But I said, you shouldn't do that to somebody long term. You need to end that foolishness. That's right. And the reason I did that was because me, my mother, my family agreed. They were going to use my mother against me and just say that I was crazy and lock me up. And you'll see that's what they tried to do with Dr. Holmes. See, I knew what these monsters were before I even walked into that room. And inside that document, I said, this is how they're going to act. Like they know it all, and here's how he's going to act. Here's how she's going to act. And I absolutely nailed it. And when I walked into the room, I set down this document right in front of them and literally called out exactly how they were going to act in that meeting. Inside of that, Jim Perrin was being asked about, you know, the racism stuff, but not necessarily directly. And I want to be very fair to him. He did want to answer the question, but Jody stopped him from answering the question. And that would be Jody Posavad. And she shamed me. And this is an important part of it, because they asked me if I had any questions, and I only had 3 really short questions. The first one was like, do you guys know each other? Have you ever met before this? Very quick. And the other one was about Jim Perrin and his past relationship. I just wanted to know a little bit about it. And it was just a single question. Were you friends with the previous chief? That's it. And she stops. This isn't going to be all about that. It's like, I wasn't, and I had no plans, and you'll see that the rest of nothing was about that. She asked me if I had any questions. Well, they had no questions for me. So to watch somebody act like that about those topics and be so dismissive, especially given that security review of Jim Perrin, I can't believe she acted like that, and the fact then that she didn't correct her behavior is very concerning, but you'll understand why she did that. What's interesting here is how they tried to fish me. They tried to get employee names. Now remember, I'm obviously being watched by all these people. The directors are trying to get me to type up people's names and send them through Gmail. Very clearly, so they can compromise and attack those employees. Jim Perrin tried to get employee names. You think that's to investigate this? No, that's to target them. That's right. The history with my manager was well documented. Everybody knew about it. They didn't need other employees. They didn't need any of that. They knew about it. There was a serious history, even with just what I was reporting. So why did you need other employees' names? Why would you need something like that? Because those monsters wanted to target them. And you'll note that Jody fished me with her card. And then you'll note the exploits on her website. Had I visited that site immediately after leaving that meeting, they'd have my IP address, and then boom, full out assault on my account. Anybody I gave it to, and it was being transferred into the US. And then how could anybody really know what's going on? Maybe she doesn't even know. Somebody could have hacked her password and is just sitting there waiting. Right? And she's sending information unencrypted. So then even CSIS just sitting there could be like, or some other party. Right? So after the meeting, I was like, I absolutely did win. I dominated them here. And I proceeded to then do a security review on Jody Posavad, and you'll see the short list of that. It was very concerning. And what's most concerning, especially given the outcome of this, is that, and I'm not trying to slander anybody, I'm just pointing out the rationality behind my statements here, is that her husband was the CEO of YMCA, who can receive very, very large donations, and nobody would question it. Right? So, in this recorded meeting, Jim did say that I would be contacted in 2 weeks. Right? This is when the recording was off, of course, but anybody would know that 2 weeks is a standard time to contact somebody. Right? So, I kind of go home to my business that night. I was like, oh my God, I beat them so bad. He's going to curb stomp me. I can't believe it. I didn't expect to do that well. The way he looked at me when he turned that recorder on was like, are you sure, dude? And it's like, no, I'm not sure, but I figure you're going to do it anyway, so. But I absolutely did dominate them. And I want to note that that recording and all my personal information has been requested under PIPEDA, and I did a very well and detailed investigation or document in regards to why I should be able to access that information. But what we're going to do is now jump forward to the next day. Now, I wanted to go talk to one of my friends, just a friend that I've friends with forever, and they were like, hey, how'd everything go? Nobody special, nothing. Right? And I said, well, you know, let's just kind of like go to IKEA and walk around. I know it's a big store, and I want to see something. I want to see something. Never told her that. I said, leave your phone under the fucking seat. We went in, we talked for a while. We didn't talk about nothing. I didn't give her documents. I didn't do nothing. We just talked. I just talked about the meeting. That's it. Like friends. And we were walking around, and you know IKEA is a big store, so you can take a lot of turns. And I'm not a paranoid person at all, and you'll see that based on my response, and this person will testify to it. We made several turns and walked quite a ways through the store, and I was like, look, every time we turn, we come across these individuals, and we've walked back and forth. So, like, I don't want to freak you out or anything, and I said this to them. And I was like, but we're going to take this turn here, and if we run into these people, they are following us. And they laughed. They're just like, I laughed too. I'm just like, I just got to be sure. And we walked around the corner, and there they were. Was a man and a woman pretending to be a couple. I laughed. I said, hey. I laughed. She's like, oh my God, they are following us. I want to leave right now. I want to leave. I was like, what? There's nothing I can do. But she's like, no, we're leaving right now. Those people are obviously following us. I wasn't paranoid. I was like, there's nothing I can do. 1%. So, it was on the 30th of January, where the World Health Organization declared an outbreak, public health emergency. That was COVID. That's when it really started globally, right? And what's interesting is inside my information, I was talking about this being a disease, the way these people acted, and how this is a different disease, you know, than like homophobia, but it's all related like that, right? And now we've got this global outbreak of COVID, right? The coronavirus is what they called it back then. And we're going to bring it right now to the end, which is January 31st, right? And now, in that recorded meeting, I asked them, like, look, what's going on here? Is this something like a 6-month contract and we're now at the end of it? And what you'll note is, I didn't know this. I didn't know anything about EMIC until 2022. But then you'll note that the EMIC contract ranged from July 5th, 2019 to January 31st, 2020. So you got August, September, October, November, December, January. I didn't know about it, but I called it out. So imagine those people watching me be so sure that I'm going to win and then talking about this stuff. And in fact, inside the technical, when I was proving my technical skills, I talked about Cambridge Analytica and machine learning. The irony is not lost on me, but I didn't know. I was just like, no, they ruined my life. And I told them, if you can't beat me, we're screwed as a country. You can't beat some little faggot dog from Ecum Secum. We're fucked. And they couldn't. All right. So that brings us all up to the 31st. I know that's a lot of information. And again, if you'd like to see more information on the recording or what happened in that time period, you can see the document December 23rd, 2021, security review of JDIrving. And, you know, it highlighted some of these vulnerabilities, and they were all given information on how to correct everything. They were given professional recommendations. I never once just bitched. Every time I said something was wrong, I provided a solution or a recommendation, because this was never about that. What I seen was an absolute cascading failure of people, and it was so concerning to me that, like, it was beyond concerning. And you knew that it was being caused by money. And, yeah, so what we're going to do is, I think it's appropriate to leave it at that. I didn't think this would take me 50 minutes, but, you know, it's a lot to cover, and these are very complex issues, and there is a lot more time I would spend on different parts of this. But, you know, I'll leave that open if anybody wants to ask me questions, right? And I'll do my best to answer them. So, yeah, I think that about covers it, and thank you very much for watching the video, and have a good day.